Are you self-coaching yourself and you just want to get better? Here's what to do. I know that sounded like a really poor infomercial, but it's where a lot of us probably are along the entire spectrum. Whether you're just starting out, getting in the gym, you're not going to hire a coach potentially right off the bat. Maybe you don't have no plans of competing and you want to just, how can I just improve along the way? To being an experienced competitor where you're like, hey, I feel like I'm ready to take some of these reins on myself. What are things that Luke and I have pulled out along the way that may help you speed along in this process? And that's what we're going to jump in today. Luke, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I like this topic because I think there are some people who actually do better coaching themselves. I've actually worked with some of these people where I've just told them like, hey, you're at the point now where you don't need me and you probably would have less stress not talking to me on the week-to-week basis or not talking to a coach because they have so much control over what they're doing on the day-to-day and they're versed enough where like making those decisions themselves probably just gives them that solace. I would say you're that person without a doubt. Like it's probably less stressful for you to make those decisions than it is to rely on somebody else. But there's also the person that this doesn't fit at all and it's going to be too much of a burden. I think what we're going to do today is objectively lay out like what it takes to do it well. And if that's something that you want to venture down yourself or not, then that's kind of a decision for yourself. And there might be different points in your journey where you do it and you don't do it. And I think that's an important aspect to touch on as well when we kind of dive into this topic. Where did you want to start typically?
Well, I think I have like at least 5 main points that I want to lay out. And the first one being, and what we talked about off camera, is get a coach.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, John, you just said this is about self-coaching, and it is. But you also need to be shown the way of just initial things of what to do. Like if you've never stepped in the gym before, you just never even saw someone train or even lift a weight. It was completely foreign. What would you do with all these equipment? You might be doing some goofy stuff, and we see really goofy stuff done in the gym, right? You're like, where did that person come up with that? They have zero coaching or no, they're not, taking attention to anyone else and what they're doing. So there is some benefit to be had. Like if you have really serious goals, it will fast track you to get a coach and help you facilitate that process. Even you're like, hey, I just don't have a lot of money to do it. And I understand that. But even if you had only 3 months of coaching, you would gain so much from understanding that process and then take it on yourself. And, it applies to certain people wouldn't have a coach or not. But I think along anyone's journey, like if I was going to go get into, I don't know, I just bought a handgun, right? And I've shot guns before. I have never had any professional training, which means I suck at it. So I want to enjoy it and have fun with it at a faster rate. I'm going to go take some courses.
Yeah.
And that will make it more enjoyable. It doesn't mean I'm going to go become a professional, do handgun, whatever, competitions or something, maybe. But it's going to help push me along to where I can enjoy this hobby more effectively, be safe, etc. Same with bodybuilding. You can have someone that at least shows you the ropes, gets you moving in the right direction, and can help you be safe and all those aspects, just like any other hobby you would do. And I would say this was an error that I made when I first started. I didn't even have a coach when I did my first competition.
Yeah.
Now, I could have been a lot better, a lot sooner if I did.
Yeah. See, I was the opposite. I dove straight into coaching with the body as soon as I decided that bodybuilding is what I wanted to try to do. Like venturing into fitness was just like my own exploration. And then when I realized that, I wanted to try this thing called bodybuilding, was like, okay, I don't know anything about this, so I need to invest. And I think that kind of leads to the second point from the investment standpoint is like, it's not only investment in coaching, it's investment in continued education is a big part of the development process and you being able to improve and improve and improve in order to do this yourself even better.
Yeah, definitely. Our point number 2 would be like invest in your own education, and whatever point of the journey you're in, this is a nonstop. And I know people might think like, John, I don't want to coach people. What do I need to go take courses or things like that? And to do anything, any hobby, you have to learn. If I'm going to go shoot these guns, I have to learn like what type of ammunition do I pick? Like, am I using the right targets? Do I hold the gun correctly? Like, I have to learn something to be able to do it at some capacity. So same thing with bodybuilding, training, trying to build muscle. You need to invest in education courses that might help you if you can't go on and buy a coach. And like a great one, not, just a plug, is the applied hypertrophy optimization course really that Luke and I put together. Like, yeah, it could help you if you're a coach, but also just takes you in the gym, shows you like if you want to train your chest more effectively, what might be some cues you use, what might be some good equipment to start with. Like this is a course to help you as an individual elevate your game quicker. So that's like an example of one, but there's all kinds of different courses out there that you could take to facilitate that, or just getting some individual training sessions in to help someone teach you and educate you. But I tell you guys, this is a nonstop process. Like I've done several pro shows, like been at the Olympia level, right? I am still learning to this day and trying to learn more. I dig of like, where are my faults and where do I have gaps missing? What can I learn? Yep. So it's a nonstop process, because as soon as you stop trying to learn, it's as soon as you stop improving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Luke, on the coaching piece, we talked about like, who should maybe get a coach. I mean, and who shouldn't get a coach. I think we nailed that. I thought there was something else I wanted to bring up, but nothing. Now it kind of like left my brain.
It's okay. You're 10 days post show. We covered this off camera. We're still in that dodgy brain space.
Yeah, of like of what that was.
I think there's a journey to discuss, right? I think most people fall into this, and this is kind of the journey I've gone upon, is your thrust into fitness is like just this, oh my God, I feel great when I move. And you just kind of tinker and figure some things out, and you go in there, you do some weird stuff, and you get some strange looks in the gym. And at some point, you create a goal set. Oh, did it come back?
I remembered it.
Oh, I saw that. It's like light bulb moment. I'll brief mine to make it easy to remember.
It's locked in. Go.
I think once that goal set's created, there's a long period of time where hiring someone and investing in yourself is very, very valuable in what you said and speeding that process up. But then you're going to get to a point where you enjoy the management of that to some extent. And some people, it's not the whole process. Like I know some people who, and I've done this for people I've worked with, who they just hate thinking about training, but they love managing their own nutrition and their diet and their PEDs and all that stuff. So like we have people on the client roster for myself and the other coaches that just the training aspect is managed because they don't want to think about it, right? And maybe that for that client, that's what self-coaching looks like for them. Like they offboard the training for someone else because they don't want to think about it, but then they handle the stuff they enjoy handling. And so you go through this process of learning and what you enjoy managing. And that's kind of where it's the self-coaching kind of leads into. And to John's point that he's not going to forget now that it's his turn to share it, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, I would add about picking up a coach off the initial and the cost that's associated with it, because for one, you might think like maybe you have money, right? You're like, well, I'm going to hire the best coach that's out there. I want to hire whatever, Hani Rambod, right? Like Derek Lunsford's Hottie's coach, Chris Bumstead's coach. Like I want the best. It's like likely you're, the unfortunate thing is, for one, they probably wouldn't even coach you because you're like, I only coach these top Olympians. Or I've seen the case where you might just be at the very bottom of that person's roster and not get the attention because there's so much attention required for these higher level athletes. I remember Renee, she was like 7 years ago going to do her first figure competition. She emailed one of these top coaches, won't mention their name. Guess what? She didn't get a response back. Go figure. And so, get a coach that's also at the level that you're currently at and where that coach specializes and puts lots of time into that type of client. And a lot of time that might not be the big name. I would look for someone that, for one, they maybe have done it themselves. That does mean a lot, but also that they do it well for others that are like you. So not for Hottie and Derek Lunsford and like coaching these genetic elite, but where do you fit in that, and have they done that same result that you want? And then also that, you know, they have some level of education and can, you know, articulate and teach, that they're a teacher at heart. So those are like the three components, because through that you'll get results, but also you're going to learn along the way for if you want to then integrate into more self-coaching. So that also comes into like cost around it too. You might be able to get some high quality coaching for a lower cost because it's starting to fit within the segment that your interest is in, and not trying to shoot for the moon and hire, you know, Hadi Rambad and, you know, pay a lot of money, and it might not be the right coaching for you. So I think your best coaching experience is going to have when you could build a relationship with that coach and have close communication. If you're picking the wrong coach, you might not get that, especially if you're going to get these, you know, one-liner responses, and you know, shop around just like you do for anything. And I think you'll quickly understand who's going to put time into you. If you get a quick email response back and it's also in-depth and really prompting and asking you lots of questions, or maybe if they have a video call with you, like that's someone that's going to invest in you and you're going to get a lot out of.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I also kind of encourage you is don't be afraid to reach out to people you resonate with, because there might be a solution within what they do. Like I know for a lot of people that work with Jamie now, who originally reached out to work with me, they've created this great relationship with her as like a coach on staff, and they're loving every second of it. And they're getting that high level coaching because she's been mentoring under me for 2 years. She was with you for a year. So like she understands like the coaching systems and application. And so it's an opportunity to work with someone who does it at a high level within a system that you resonate with. Right. So there is opportunity to be kind of plugged into that if you're open to that journey.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that really checks off like our point number one. I mean, jumping back over to point number two, it's along the same lines that came to mind about just like you want to be hiring the right coach, you also want to be hiring the right educators, especially in this current education space. There's a lot of people you can get your education from, but it would go along the same lines of your checklist for being a coach. Like, do they do it themselves? Do they help others out do it too? And what they're saying is it makes some type of logical sense, you know? And also might have to remove some of the emotional ties around the entertainment value that we see in social media, because you have some people that they're just fun to watch, and that's fine. And sometimes you get education tidbits along the way, but they might not be accurate. It's just off the cuff. You know, this is what I do, and might not be applying to yourself. So with so many educators out there, dig through those things and make sure that it's something that is appropriate to apply to yourself, and that they do actually coach people in the background that get results like you want. So investing in the right education. I think to throw it back now to your point two, Luke, is our point number three is like, maybe you can't do the coaching thing. And you need something though, is looking for maybe mentors or a second eye. And to kind of kick this off, like when I was in high school, I wanted to powerlift. Obviously, I'm in high school. My parents aren't going to pay for powerlifting coaching. And I don't even know if that was a thing then, to where you would even find it. But I went to a gym where there was some powerlifters, and they were like 40 years old and stupid strong. And I just started lifting with them. And that was invaluable and free. So where can we find free coaching? You know, and I think that is, where's the community at for where they do this around you? You know, or some guys that have a little bit of experience, you might be able to pick their brains, and yeah, that could start earlier on, right? If you have that network where you could build on. And don't get me wrong, like there's going to be limitations within that, like because you find the big guy at the gym, you're like, hey man, what do you do? And it's like, yeah, you shouldn't be asking this big guy at the gym. He's going to give you just some the bro advice, or like, you know, everyone has an opinion. If they lift weights or eat food, they're going to have some advice that they can give you, right?
Yeah.
And this space gets very strongly opinionated. But anyway, but for someone that, you have no knowledge of it at all, or you're trying to learn, you might be able to find some good connections with some guys and have some community there. Or just, man, I've had people that I've become friends with that are just relentless in reaching out and trying to build a relationship with me. And eventually, I'm like, hey, I kind of like this guy. And we just become friends. And it's someone that I otherwise never would. And then they throw me some questions every now and then. And because we're friends and I like them, I answer them. So now I'm going to get blown up on DMs.
Yeah, please.
Right there.
Yeah, you just set yourself up for massive failure right now.
I'm gonna go be John.
I think that's where, and this is why I value the forum so much with what we have kind of in the J3U community, because I don't remember where I was, but I was at a show in the last 6 to 8 months. And I had 1 or 2 people say that they prep themselves just with getting feedback in the forums, for the show. Right. And that's a prime example of community that can kind of help you with that. We have people posting their progress pictures in there all the time and, asking just for hey, am I moving in the right direction? Am I far enough out, or am I lean enough to be this far out? And kind of helps them with that and that support. And it's really invaluable to be able to kind of have that peace of mind, that solace, because it's almost confirming what it is you're thinking. Now, what I would say is avoiding confirmation bias is important. And picking those people in that community that are going to give it to you straight rather than just agree with you is an important aspect. And I think you can speak to this some, because I know you've kind of got those few people in your pocket that you feel like, if shit's hitting the ceiling fan, they're going to tell you. And it's such an invaluable thing, because I know for myself, if I need feedback on something and I come to you with it, you're going to be like, yeah, this is dumb. Or you're going to be like, this is moving, fantastically. And that characteristic trait of your surrounding community is one of the most invaluable pieces that you can have, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think whether you're just starting out, having some place to go for that, and like you said, the forums, and just another plug, there's a 7-day free trial for guys, and it's $20 a month otherwise. So there's hundreds of pages in there of just me answering questions. You could search a topic, whatever it is, about gear, training, and I guarantee I've already answered it to some capacity. But anyway, that's earlier on. But as you move up the ranks, yes, I do coach myself, but I absolutely have a second eye and need to verify things that I might be seeing, or have some different perspective and things that I might be missing. So, I'll send my picks to Luke and ask him some certain questions around them. Or I have also used Chris Tuttle as well, because he's a close friend, and both these guys will shoot it to me as straight as possible and no sugarcoating, because your friends, family, people that are close might be great hype men and women and build you up. Yeah, you're looking on track. You're looking great. Keep going, which is great to have, cheerleaders, but we also need people that will just cut and dry. This is what we're seeing from the non-cheerleading perspective. And you need that, even if you're as high level as can be.
Point 4?
Point number 4. I would say, we'll be collecting the right data. So this gets
so good.
Getting more to the nuts and bolts of actually the coaching process. Now, one thing that I did well early on is the fact that I did like data. And it's more so making sure now you just collect the right stuff. If you're going to self-coach and just be very intuitive and not write down anything, you're going to have a lot harder time making decisions, because you're at a point earlier on where you just don't have the intuition to make the right calls because no one has taught you. And you might even have a harder time, even presented with the right data, to assess the data and make the right decision from there. But along this learning process of being able to get the right data, assess it, into having the right intuition and assess it and make the right call, you have to start somewhere. And it would be, I think, helpful to be a little bit more objective off the front end with having good data collection. And what that means is tracking some of these variables to where at the end of the week or end of the month, you can look back and say, this is progress in the right direction or not, and then do something about it. And you try something out, but then you can look through that data and say, well, that didn't work. And you at least cross that off of something you shouldn't be doing, but you're going to find a checklist of things you should be for your physique. And then that's going to eventually build into where you have a really great program for yourself. And then through those experiences, you start building that intuition of just knowing the calls without having to look at so much data. Now, Luke, would you say there's certain data that really stands out to you that you should be collecting?
It's funny you bring this up. I was cleaning up the other day, and I found some of my old composition notebooks from the early bodybuilding years before I was enjoying using Excel spreadsheets. And it's funny when you look back at just like all the shit that I wrote down, some of it just like not valuable, some of it valuable. I think the big ones to take away when regards to like what data points can be valuable for the coaching process is just the obvious ones on the forefront, which is training recovery / performance. I think if people focused on that a lot more, they would make a lot more progress. I think there's so many different ways to skin the cat when it comes to nutrition and supplementation and even potentially PEDs that is going to lead to progress. And you could potentially argue training as well. But I think there's something invaluable about watching that metric consistently over a long period of time without a lot of variable change to be able to know what works and what doesn't. I think one of the traps people fall into is, especially now, I think less so back when we would have started, is the latest trend. And that's always going into their new training or going into their new setup or going into whatever they want to do, rather than objectively like taking notes on what they felt like progressed each block. And I used to like write out the full program. As so funny. And the reason I bring this up is because I think it's why I took on the training side so quickly, is I would write the full program, and for each session, I would write what worked and what didn't, what I felt, what I didn't, and then at the end of the block, grade how I felt like my physique progressed during that training block. So like if I felt like quad progress was faster than hamstring progress or back progress faster than whatever. And so some of that was subjective data, right? And probably so subjective that it didn't matter, but it still brings me back to the training performance one, because I think that's so training performance relative to recovery capacity, because I think that's something that's so overlooked and it's just so valuable.
Hey everyone, it's John with J3U. I want to take a brief moment of your time to tell you about the new module that we added into J3U Level 1. So just like Luke and I are talking about, if you self-coach or even coach others, part of the hard part of doing this is what do you do with all this data? How do you become a top athlete or coach or just build muscle more effectively? What I've done is taken our first lecture series out of J3U, and it's now Foundations of Coaching. And so what you'll be introduced to in the first lecture is, as a coach or athlete, how do you handle branding, content creation? What about athlete sponsorships? How to communicate progress effectively as an athlete or as a coach? Lecture 2 will take you through physique assessment, where we'll look at stage pictures or your current physique, understand where body fat is, where you need to go muscularity wise. Then how do we track all the variables, like for training, PED usage and health, nutrition, and what should that look like? And through that, I'm gonna give you my own Excel sheet so you can program in your variables and start tracking along the way. Not only with this new lecture series, you'll get how to become a top coach or athlete, but also all the other modules in J3U, from programming hypertrophy training, learning all about health, PED usage, and programming it fully in a contest prep, getting someone on stage, what to do post-show, and how to grow really effectively in the off-season. Join J3U, the link is down below in the description, and let's jump back into the podcast. Yeah, I agree. I mean, what's gonna really drive the improvement is getting a great training stimulus. And I do think our current culture is very Excel sheet program driven. Like there's just podcasts and arguments simply over one variable on an Excel sheet, right? Like RIR or should you use a heavier load or a lighter load, and all the programming nuts and bolts that are laid out, and everyone's looking for the perfect program that's out there. But you forget, like, you need to go in the gym and execute these things, and training then becomes an art, not necessarily just a mathematical equation that's laid out on a sheet.
Yeah.
So there's two components to this, and Luke, in his early days tracking, actually did a pretty good job of this, right? So we absolutely should be looking at the loads and reps and how those are progressing across blocks. The exercises that you pick, you should have notes, though, around what are you connecting well with? What are you not? And then changing those exercises to ones that you do, or figuring out ways where you can get that really strong connection and see load reps improve across training blocks. If you do those two things, man, you'll make a lot of progress. So I think both those types of data would be vastly beneficial. It's tracking your lifts progression, but also have something that you're noting down. Could be at the end of your session of like what went well and what didn't, what might need to change the next session, but also like you need to make sure you write things out for a good chunk of time too, like at least an 8 to 12 week block before making those changes.
Where does your head go? Where does your head go next as far as like a couple more data points? Because mine goes towards like health metrics and digestion metrics as like the other two big contributors to progress.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to rank them necessarily because they all have their own individual weight.
Yeah, no, not ranking, just like on
sure.
top of.
I mean, I feel like mine goes to nutrition. It's a simpler one, just because it's such a big input that has a lot of flexibility in it, where you could have a lot of inaccuracy if you're not accurately tracking what you're putting in nutrition wise. And that it depends on the level you're trying to get to, right? Like for someone earlier on, like if you're just lifestyle, maybe you just track calories or maybe you just track protein and calories. Maybe that's just macros, but whatever you're doing, it needs to be accurate to where everything you are ingesting is relatively tracked, or you have standardized things that just never change, so you don't necessarily need to track them. Up to the point when you're like, hey, I really want to get to the pro level bodybuilding ranks, and we everything's tracked down to where by the end of a couple weeks, if your physique is shifting in one direction, you could look over like, well, this is my exact calorie input and understand what that meant from a physique visual change and scale weight change to where you can then make the next call. Because if that's inaccurate, man, you really won't be able to know, well, where am I at nutrition-wise to even make a change. So, like, for myself, I used to track on Excel, like, my exact food and all the macros, and that's exactly what I would eat. Like, I wouldn't deviate at all, ever. And it was very restrictive. I could do it because I loved what I was doing. But for a lot of people, that's just too much. Like they get burnt out easy and they need more flexibility. So I think just having, for one, an accurate way to track macros, and that's how I do it now, relatively, right? So I have a pretty much a backbone framework of my diet, and some meals just never change. But every now and then I want to swap out like this rice for some rice cakes or something. So I'll use I use Kahuna's as a coaching app to do it. Or if you don't have that, like Chronometer is a good app to use to just swap out some food sources every now and then to give you some flexibility. And that can help with adherence and sustainability and enjoyment for your clients or yourself. So that's like one way to do it. But yeah, I think the nutrition piece comes to mind next.
I agree.
And I did bring up like what to track to make calls. Like the big one here is like, why are you even doing this? It's for your physique. So how you look. So you should probably be tracking how you look. And I think coaching yourself, you can lose some accountability.
Yeah.
Is taking your visual pictures, getting quality, right? Like good light on you, good camera quality, not 20 feet away with a bunch of shadows, and can just unrelentingly, like every week you take your pictures or whatever it may be. It could be every 2 weeks. Just you don't compromise on that to where you can look back over time and see those changes. coaching at some point for me, I get lazy. And at one point I would take pics every now and then. And this is earlier on, especially in the off season, because you just don't really want to see the visuals. But I was tracking scale weight for sure. And because I was so focused on, man, I want to hit 200 pounds or 220 pounds. And so I was just making sure that scale went up every week. And I got fat. Man, I got fat, right, for bodybuilding standards. Yeah. But that is one of the things about tracking the right data and also not looking too hard at one piece of data, because that can lead you to make poor decisions. So I used to also track like circumference measures weekly when I look back on my own like handwritten stuff I had for like every body part. Every single week I would do this, and caliper sites, which I'm like, what's changing that fast? But it's that's part of the data where I think it's too much to need to be tracking. I think if you're tracking your visuals and your scale weight, that could be plenty to go very, very far with.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think I'd add more.
Yeah, I think from there, I mean, just things earlier on, I didn't really understand to piece together, because the recovery side is so huge, right? That if you're recovering well, you can train harder or train more and grow faster or lose body fat more effectively. I think just being mindful of sleep quality and stress, having something that you're jotting down biofeedback wise would be important to where you can kind of scale that. And that's where I think you're like, what Luke was doing earlier on is taking some subjective notes around how you feel. So the biofeedback piece is, how do you feel about certain things? How'd you feel about sleep last night? Don't say good. Just, and I had to tell my client, if you listen to this, it's going to be like, damn it, John. I was like, you're not allowed to say good, great, or bad. Like, just remove it from your vocabulary when you're doing your own biofeedback. Because what do you say? Like, yeah, sleep was good, training was good, bowel movements were good. And you're like, well, what does that mean to me? I need to be able to have what is good. And so you have to expand upon that. Like, what made sleep good? Well, I woke up rested after 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. It gave me energy throughout the day that was sustained. Like, all right, that's actually really good biofeedback. Or your nutrition biofeedback. Like, after meal one, I experienced a lot of bloating and gas and had low appetite for the next 5 hours. Like, all right, note that down. Like, this is the stuff that you're noting down. Now, you can do that for sleep and also stress. I think it's mindful to be that your life situations are going to impact your results. That was a complete disconnect when I was first coaching myself earlier on. And to be able to try to reduce that, I need to know where I'm at currently. So I think if you're going to track two things to jot these things down would be around sleep and stress. I think just being aware of them, you're going to be able to start improving them.
I think the thing I like about those two is a large shift in those is very apparent on both sides of the equation. Like, there's potential for something in the data side to largely affect the sleep and the mood characteristics. Or if life stress just goes through the roof, there's potential for that to affect the data-driven side. So it's pretty easy to see some pretty large quick correspondence when you see these radical changes. Don't laugh at this, but the one that came to mind from my early days is I thought I was a bad mother effer deadlifting, right? And I thought it was a great idea to do drop set deadlifts. And so I know. You're sumo pulling because, you want to put more weight on the bar and you like deadlifting and it's just fun to lift heavy shit. And so we would start at 4 plates, hit failure, pull it to 3, hit failure, pull it to 2, hit failure, right? And I remember the first time I did that and I did not sleep that entire night. I was like, yeah, maybe this is not a good decision because I didn't sleep that whole night and it wrecked my sleep for the next 5 days. Mind you, I'm in engineering school at the time. So not sleeping is not ideal for the whole school side of the equation. So you'll see these large shifts pretty quickly when you do something stupid like that. And to add to that, like, it's okay to make mistakes. Just rectify them when you see them.
Man, that reminds me, I was at the rec in college, and my first bodybuilding program was like hypertrophy specific training. It was, I think it's by Brian Haycock, and it was full body training. There was straight sets, but I didn't want to do straight sets. I want to do rest pause sets. I did that on squats. It was like 365, set to failure, rest 30 seconds, set to failure, rest 30 seconds, set to failure. Annihilated. I was taken out. I barely walked out of there. I threw up in front of the rec. Then finally, after laying there again, I finally got up, made it to the car, then laid down at my friend's house for I don't know how long until like my blood sugar got regulated. Like it was like I couldn't even train the rest of the time. I was so wrecked. So self-coaching gone wrong.
We laughed because like we thought it was such a great idea at the time, and then you do it, you realize how bad of an idea it actually is.
When you remember it, you know it wrecked you. You know, it's like I know the people that were there, like Frank and Chris were there. Like I recall all the moments. There was that scarring, right? But anyway, so reeling that back, like if you had to make this like list of things that you should be tracking, right? You're gonna take your visuals. You're gonna have a scale weight that you're doing. You're gonna have your lift and your logbook that you're tracking, and at the bottom of your logbook, maybe you're taking some biofeedback notes around, how you're feeling off these exercises and connection. Then you're gonna also have something around how's sleep going biofeedback wise. Your stress levels. Then also your sixth thing is going to be maybe it's your average calorie intake for the week with macros laid out. Yep. I think if you have all those that bit of data that you're tracking, you could do a ton with that if you're self-coaching on a week to week or every other week basis to make sure that progress is happening. And just to mention, like point number 5 that we had, that was journal your biofeedback. So
we kind of hit 4 and 5 together.
Yeah, they go together. So I think going through like the things today, it really would elevate if I went back to like younger John or younger Luke to give that layout, how that would have helped tremendously, I think, for either one of us.
Yeah, I think we ended up stumbling there over a period of years, but it would have been so much faster that, it would have allowed us to iterate a lot faster as well.
Yeah. And so if you're out there and you are self-coaching and trying to improve yourself along the process, hopefully you're able to get a coach. And I think that's really like the first thing to do if you really want to elevate your game. But understandably so, if you can't, try to find some community that you can get plugged in with, where you might find training partners or people that can elevate you along the way. But just make sure that community and that group that you are getting plugged in with, again, has done it themselves, helped other people do it, and has some good basis in just logical explanations or education to back it up for what they're doing. And then, like we mentioned, collect the right data, journal down your biofeedback. I think if you're doing all those things, you'll be on your way to having successful self-coaching. And if you really want to help improve your coaching or your self-coaching, come to Luke and I. Like, this is why J3 University came about to begin with, because I self-coached for so long. Then I had a coach. Then I went back to self-coaching. And along the way, I just had to learn all this stuff, and it's a continuing learning process. So if you want to learn more about coaching or self-coaching, jump into J3 University, and we have all types of different levels to start at. So you don't have to have the big financial investment to being a full-on, full-time coach as a job. You can just enter the forum and just interact with us and ask questions. So start there. And I hope you all enjoy your self-coaching or coaching journey. If you have questions, comments, leave them down below, and we will talk to you next time.